Let's go, huh? He picked up Broximon, placed him on his right shoulder, and left the apartment. He always met the tour bus outside the cafe where he ate his breakfast. The bus driver was one of those fools taken in by Hayden's looks and sometimes charm, and was thus more than happy to detour a few blocks out of his way to pick up the tour guide. The bus doors hissed open. Simon Hayden charged up the stairs, lit from within by 2 cups of strong cappuccino and the optimism that comes with knowing that you're going to spend the day with a bunch of young women. The bus driver, whose name was Fleem Sewell, waved one of its many tentacles in greeting at Simon. Then with another tentacle, it pressed the button to close the door. Hayden had always loved octopuses. Or was it octopi? He would have to ask Fleem Sewell that someday, but not now because women ahoy. Winking at the octopus bus driver, Hayden put on his best, most winning smile and turned to face the passengers. Outside on the street, Broximon stood and watched as the bus pulled away from the curb. A maple leaf blown by the wind collided with him, disappearing the tiny man completely from view for a second. He brusquely pushed it away, and the leaf fled down the street. Shaking his head, he reached into his pocket and took out a cell phone the size of a pencil eraser. Speed dialing a number, he waited for it to connect. Hey, yeah, it's Brox. Yep, I was just with him. Broximon listened while the other voice said something long and involved. Down at the corner, the traffic light turned green. The tour bus took a left and disappeared into the city. Broximon started going up and down on his toes and looking at the sky as the other person talked on. Eventually, he was able to get in. Look, Hayden doesn't get it yet. It's as simple as that. He doesn't have the slightest clue. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's not on the map yet. Broximon saw a bright red cookie wrapper skittering down the street toward him. He started moving out of its way long before it arrived. Seeing it pass reminded him that he hadn't had breakfast yet. That made him doubly impatient to get off the telephone and find a place to eat. Look, I don't know how better to tell you. He doesn't get it. There is not one indication that simple Simon sees the big picture. Listening some more to the voice on the other end, Broximon was no longer paying any attention. To amuse himself, he stuck out his tongue and crossed his eyes. After holding that pose for a while, he couldn't take the other's verbal diarrhea anymore. So he said, What? What? Oh, I'm losing you. Bye. Then he pressed the disconnect button and turned the phone off altogether. Enough. Breakfast time. It took several seconds for Hayden's eyes to adjust to the blue dark inside the bus. He was so eager to see the women that he squinted hard to distinguish who sat facing him. The first thing he saw was a cassowary in a green dress. Do you know what a cassowary is? Neither did Hayden. Nor did he remember the one time he had seen one at a zoo. He stopped to look at it, thinking once again how weird nature was. Seeing that giant bird now in a green dress staring at him, his eyes narrowed. Oh no, they weren't going to do this to him again, were they? He remembered that one time where excuse me. Trying to locate the face, he worked very hard to overcome his growing dismay. Yes? He hoped his voice sounded happy and helpful. Is there a lavatory on this bus? Lavatory? When was the last time he'd heard that stupid word used? 4th grade? Smirking a little, he looked toward the questioner. Seeing her, his smirk died and Hayden almost yelped because she was absolutely hair-raisingly beautiful and blind. That's right. Even in that shadowy space, he could plainly see the woman's eyes were so deep-set in her head that they could not possibly have been functional. Yeah, there's a lavatory at the back of the bus, on the left side. Absurdly and without thinking, he beamed his best, most winning smile at her, not that she could see it. Like a crazy young dog pulling on its leash, all Hayden wanted to do then was race down the aisle to her side and ask everything. What was her name? Where was she from? What was she doing there? He held himself back, though, and tried to calm his mad-to-get-there impulse. He silently chanted to himself, slowly, slowly, do this right. For the first time since being hired to do this miserable job, Simon Hayden was glad to be a tour guide. Glad that today's sightseeing would last for hours. It was the top dollar, see everything, 15 stops, watch your step getting off the bus tour. Normally he loathed it. But today, with this blind angel along for the ride, it would be bliss. Not that it mattered, but he looked over the rest of the passengers on the bus. There were a few people, a few animals, 2 cartoon characters, and an almost 6-foot-tall bag of caramels. Nothing special, nothing new. If they had been his only customers that day, it would have taken a real effort to rise to their occasion. But with that babe sitting on the aisle in row 7, he was going to enchant them all. He picked up the bus microphone and turned it on. Blowing into it once, he heard his short puff resound throughout the bus speakers, proof that the thing was working. Sometimes it didn't, and to add insult to injury, he ended the day hoarse. Good morning and welcome on board. As one, the humans, animals, and cartoon characters smiled at him, but the giant transparent bag of caramels shuffled impatiently in its seat. Let's go, it appeared to be saying. Let's get this show on the road. Hayden disliked caramels. He ate a lot of candy because he had a sweet tooth, but caramels were too much work and too much trouble. Invariably, they stuck in his teeth like gluey pests, and it even pulled out an expensive filling when he ate one at his parents' house. But they were very much a part of his childhood memories because his fat father loved caramels and was always eating them. So his mother stationed little plates of the golden squares all around the house for her man. Well, today we're going to try and give you a pretty good overview of the city. We'll be starting in the center naturally and then working our way... Excuse me. He recognized her voice immediately, and with a dazzling smile that could have lit the inside of the bus like a 1,000-watt bulb, he turned to the blind woman, ready to heed her every wish. Yes? Is there a lavatory on this bus? Now, the only way to make beauty ugly is to show that it's crazy. Like twisting the top off a jar of something wonderful to eat. The moment we're hit by the terrible smell of it gone bad, even the hungriest person will drop the jar in the trash without a second thought. Hayden took a short, quick breath as if he'd been punched in the stomach. She already asked that question 30 seconds ago. Was she nuts? Was all that beauty wasted because she had scrambled eggs for brains? Maybe she just hadn't heard his response. Was that possible? Maybe she'd been distracted or thinking about something else when he had specifically said... He stared at her, not really knowing what to say now. And as he stared, something dawned on him. He knew this woman. We rarely forget great beauty, but sometimes it does happen. He ignored her question now because something in him kept saying, I know her face. But where do I know it from? The bus suddenly jolted to an abrupt stop, knocking Hayden way off balance. He turned to see what had made the driver slam on the brakes like that. Through the front windshield, he saw a school class of young kids being shepherded across the street by a middle-aged black woman wearing a vibrantly colored dashiki and an afro haircut that made her head look like a round, carefully trimmed hedge. When all the kids had crossed the street and were safely on the other side, the woman raised a hand and wriggled her fingers in thanks to the bus driver for stopping. At first, Hayden didn't recognize the woman, her afro hairdo, or dashiki. It was her wriggle. He knew that wriggle. He had lived with it for a long time at one time in his life. In a second, he was absolutely sure of her. He knew the wriggle, he knew the gesture, and now he knew the woman who made it. Whipping his head around, he looked at the beautiful blind woman. He knew her too. What the hell was going on here? Why was the world too familiar to him all of a sudden? Back a few rows in the bus, Donald Duck looked across the aisle at the cassowary and slowly raised one of his big eyebrows. The cassowary saw this and shrugged. Mrs. Dugdale. Her name fell on top of Hayden's head like a brick dropped from the roof. She was my teacher. The octopus bus driver looked at him. Who was? Hayden pointed excitedly through the windshield in the direction of where the children had just gone. Her! The black woman who just passed with all the kids. That was my teacher in 3rd grade. The driver looked in the rearview mirror a moment at the passengers. At least half of them had slid forward in their seats expectantly, as if waiting for something very important to happen. But the driver feigned indifference. Oh yeah? She was your teacher, huh? So what? Too late for me to run over her now. Let me out. I got to talk to her. You can't leave now, Simon. We just started a tour. Open the door. I got to get out. Open the door. They'll fire you, man. If you walk out on a tour like this, you're history. Don't do it. Fleem, we're not having a discussion here, okay? Just open the damn door. Hayden was a big man with impressive muscles. Fleem Sewell was only a small octopus and wasn't about to argue. However, it couldn't resist flinging a last warning at the other's back as he walked down the steps to the street. You're in trouble now, Simon. As soon as I tell them about this back at the office, they're going to fire your ass. But Hayden wasn't listening. He didn't even hear the door hiss shut behind him and then the bus pull away from the crosswalk. He certainly did not see all the passengers flock to one side of the bus to see what he was going to do next. Even the beautiful